The economy isn't doing as well as we are told. It never is. Even in 2018, where 90% of assets were in the negative, the sentiment was incredibly high. Stores are shutting down everywhere. Governments are entirely unstable. People are in the maximum debt ever in history on any scale you can measure it. And still, the euphoria is so powerful, it blinds the zombie masses from reality. Oh well, here we go again. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Today we're going to look at a very serious topic. Most people are living just above the poverty line. So we're going to cover this issue today. I think it is incredibly important to understand where we are at, the amount of debt that people have, and how that affects the average person, particularly in a crisis scenario. This first part comes from a website called How Much, a website I've talked about on many occasions. They basically take data and put it into diagrams and make it really easy for people to understand and share. America's middle class is vanishing. Nearly half of workers earn less than $30,000. I'll show you the diagram associated with that, how much Americans make in wages, distribution of wage earners by level of net compensation. 48% of wage earners had a net compensation less than or equal to the median wage, which is estimated to be $31,000. That right there tells us we've got something to worry about. When half of the American public, American workers, are making $30,000 a year, you've got a problem because that is not enough to survive on. And I'll show you the statistics more in just a moment. But I wanted to give you this diagram for you to look at for a moment, just to show you what people are making right now. Yes, there are some people making millions of dollars a year. Yes, there are extremely high net worth individuals, but the vast majority of the American workers are making $30,000 a year. When you look at the SSA website, the Social Security Administration website, it gives you the wage statistics. Now, these are numbers from 2017, but it gives us a good idea of where we're at today. And you can see the same line that they took from howmuch.net right here. By definition, 50% of wage earners had a net compensation less than or equal to the median wage, which is estimated to be $31,000 for 2017. You could scroll down, see the chart, see the data if you'd like. But I just wanted to show you that it's not How Much that has this data and you can trust them or not trust them. It's directly from the SSA's own website, so you could see it for yourself if you're interested. All the links will be in the description of the video if you want to take a look. This is an article out of CNBC. I want you to note the information at the bottom first, then we'll look at the chart. You may have heard that wages are finally starting to go up, and they are. According to the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics shows the growth of more than 3%, the highest in almost a decade, and that information has been brought out. You've seen individuals who have their 7 shares of Amazon, and they've been so elated at the information that wages are going up, jobs are doing well, manufacturing is supposedly booming. The economy has never been better in the history of the country. Oh my goodness, how did this ever happen? But there's a big caveat to this number. It's not adjusted for inflation. When taking that into account, wages are growing less than 1% faster than inflation, and this holds across a few different measures of compensation. You could see on the chart at the top where we are at today. The United States is not seeing the growth that it once had, and the numbers, of course, never take into account inflation, and that's fake inflation. That's not even the real inflation. Most people would argue that inflation rates are not what the Federal Reserve presents to the public. 2%, it is just not realistic. Maybe you would say 3%, maybe 4%. Some would say a lot higher, and other calculations show that number to be significantly higher. But let's even just say 4%. We're not even factoring that in. People are losing money. When you see the calculations of how this is done, you realize, wait a second, those numbers are false. Of course, the way they do this is designed that way. For example, the way that they build these models is essentially if they had a steak in there in the first place, suddenly steak becomes too expensive, the person will then choose ground beef instead. Once the ground beef becomes too expensive, they remove that from the formula, and now you're eating something else. Well, that's not a cost of living indicator, you can't measure it like that. You have to keep the same objects in there or else the information is false. And that's what they do. But 99.9% of people don't know that. So hopefully now that information will become more mainstream as time goes on. Now we're going to spend some time not talking about the soon-to-be richest woman in the world. We are going to talk about the cost of living, the purchasing power of a dollar in every state. So depending on where you are in the United States, your dollars could take you further than where you are in a different place in the United States. So this article here out of USA Today just has this information, and basically what it's suggesting to you is that if you live in certain states, your dollar doesn't really buy you much. If you live in another state, it takes you much further. You can scroll through the list if you're interested. I didn't want to waste your time and cover every single one, but Alabama, Alaska, you can see the difference between these two. If you take Arizona as an example, value of a dollar is actually $1.04. A place like California, you only get 88 cents out of that dollar. Shows you the personal income, shows you the median home value. So it's important not just to look at it on a national level, but to break it down further and further and further as much as you can, of course within reason, but it just gives us a better idea of where individuals are hurting the most and where you can see the cracks starting to form in these places. Obviously, they're going to be heavily in debt in these places. Speaking of debt, that brings me to my last piece of information. Federal poverty guidelines. In this, you can see what they define as to be poverty. Now, if you have a household or family size of 4 people, if you look at the bottom of this page, you can see right here, $25,000 is considered poverty. Now, of course, it depends how many people are working, but in many families, there are one wage earner, or there are 2 people, maybe they're working part-time jobs. Some people are far better than this scenario, but this is the poverty line, basically. So if the average person is making $30,000 and the poverty line is $25,000, we have a problem. If there's only one wage earner. Now, of course, if there are 2 people and they are working full-time, then we can expect that they're making more than that. Then you have to factor in the taxation, you have to factor in the expenses that people have on a daily basis. But this basically just tells us right now where the line is, and I wanted to make you aware of how close those two are. $30,000 to $25,000. A $5,000 difference makes a big impact. Imagine an individual who's heavily burdened by debt and they suddenly find that their expenses increase because the interest rates on that debt increases as well. They are going to be burdened that $5,000 in no time. So we have to start worrying about this as interest rates rise. This is a problem for a lot of people, not just in the United States, but we are seeing the exact same thing. Delinquencies are rising right now in Canada. I have not got a chance to really look into that too deeply, but I know that this information has just come into effect. Canadians right now, the most debt they have ever been in history, but the same applies to the United States. We're seeing the same thing all across Europe, all across Asia, South America, and so on. We see this happening today, and the average person is completely unaware. As long as things go smoothly, they don't need to worry. But most people hopefully will be wise going into the next crisis. They won't be so oblivious as they were in 2008, people being left on the streets and still have yet to recover as a result. All right, that information hopefully was informative to you. If it was, please give me a thumbs up. When you give me a thumbs up, you're supporting this channel, so I do appreciate that very much. And last but not least, if you want the financial education you were not taught in school, then these 2 books have everything that you need. You can actually flip through them at Amazon. There's a link in the description of this video. And if you want the audiobook version, you can get that at themoneygps.com.